The United States celebrates its Independence Day, marking when it declared its independence from Great Britain on July 4, 1776. The day was a climatic day in world history, but it was an event that was about 20 years in the making. The event that is credited with starting the events leading to the American Revolution was the French and Indian War, which started on May 28, 1754, and was the precursor to the larger 7 Years' War between Great Britain and France. The war ended after the signing of the Treaty of Paris, which ended the war with a British victory and forced the French to cede most of their North American colonies to Britain and parts to Spain. The most significant part for the American colonies was that the war caused the British national debt to dramatically increase, and this created a series of British proclamations and actions to force the colonies to help pay off this debt. King George III, in addition to taxing the colonists, forbade them from settling beyond the Appalachian Mountains on October 7, 1763, in an attempt to prevent the colonists from deepening their settlement and evading British taxation and regulation. This was followed by a series of taxes in 1764 and 1765 with the Sugar Act, Stamp Act, and Quartering Act, which was not a direct tax but required the colonists to provide housing and food to British troops in the colonies, which is the reason for the Third Amendment to the Bill of Rights in the later U.S. Constitution. The Virginia State Assembly, along with several other colonies, challenged the Stamp Act at the Stamp Act Congress in 1765. Due to the loss of revenue from colonial boycotts of British trade, the British Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. However, in March 1766, they passed the Declaratory Act, which reaffirmed the Parliament and Crown's authority over the colonies. The Declaratory Act was nearly identical to the Irish Declaratory Act, which placed Ireland under Great Britain's firm and brutal control. This implied that Great Britain would treat the American colonies similarly. In August 1768, Boston merchants signed the Boston Non-Importation Agreement, pledging not to purchase goods from or sell to Great Britain as a form of protest against the ongoing acts of Parliament. The tensions in Boston ran high due to the ongoing taxation disputes with Britain, which had placed a larger British garrison to enforce the Parliament's acts. This led to the Boston Massacre in March 1770, when a group of 9 British soldiers opened fire on a crowd of hundreds of protesters, some of whom were throwing projectiles at the soldiers, which eventually killed 5 Bostonians and wounded 6 others. Parliament passed the Tea Act to help the British East India Company sell its overcrowded warehouses filled with tea to the American colonies at a price that was meant to undercut the tea smuggling trade. This event sparked the Boston Tea Party on December 16, 1773, prompting the Parliament to retaliate by closing the port of Boston in March 1774. The response was that 12 of the 13 colonies called the First Continental Congress in September 1774. The Congress called on the colonies to establish and train militias, and another petition was sent to the king to redress grievances and repeal the intolerable acts. On April 18, 1775, King George refused, prompting the British to send troops to seize powder and weapons from Lexington. This led to the famous Ride of Paul Revere, the Battle of Lexington, and the shot heard around the world on April 19th, which forced the British Army to retreat back to Boston. On May 10th, Ethan Allen captured Fort Ticonderoga, and the Second Continental Congress met for the first time in Philadelphia. The new Congress appointed George Washington as commander-in-chief of the new army, and he assumed field command of the army outside of Boston in July, a month after the American defeat at Bunker Hill in June. As the colonies were preparing for war, one last attempt to avoid war with Britain came with the Olive Branch Petition on July 5, 1775, as battles were breaking out across the colonies and in what is now modern-day Canada. Congress rejected the petition, prompting the submission of the Lee Resolution on June 7, 1776, which called for the colony's independence from Great Britain. This led to the Second Continental Congress declaring independence on July 2, 1776, and ratifying the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776. The final paragraph of the Declaration makes an unequivocal statement of independence. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.